Awesome. So thank you everyone who signed up and is here watching the webinar. I'm here with Michelle, and today we're talking about how to effectively build lead nurturing campaigns. Just a couple of housekeeping items in terms of questions. So if you do have questions, what we'll do is we'll keep them at the end. We'll make sure we leave 5 minutes to answer them. Do feel free to type them throughout the conversation to make sure that we have them built up for you at the end, and we can get right into them. But just understand that we will answer them at the end rather than break up the flow throughout. And with that being said, I'll pass it over to Michelle just to give a little bit of background on herself, and then we can dive into building lead nurturing campaigns.
Thanks, Alex, and hi to everyone that is attending. And my name is Michelle Urban, and I run a small little marketing shop called Marketing 261, where I help tech startups with their marketing initiative. My past clients and past work experience has been with Vertical Response, Good Data, Librato, Paper Trail, Product Board, Rancher Labs. So I'm really excited to be here because in all of my jobs and all of my clients, the common denominator has always been lead nurturing. And some more robust than others, some more successful, some more, oops, should have done that. So I'm really excited to be here with Alex and talk about lead nurturing and no lead ever left behind, ever.
That's awesome. And I guess just in terms of transparency, Michelle, we worked together a little bit ago before you moved on to start your own thing. With LeadSift, so you do have experience integrating the data into some programs. We are going to try and keep the conversation as agnostic as possible to make sure that it's providing as much value regardless of if you do use LeadSift, but we'll make sure that we do touch on some of the aspects of what LeadSift data does as well throughout for any of you that have questions around that. So with that being said, I guess, Michelle, we can kind of, from a conversation standpoint, our goal will be to work through essentially how your thought process is when you start with a new company or you start evaluating how you're going to start with a lead nurture program. And I guess the first part of that is you start to receive leads or you have leads, and now what?
I actually kind of like to take it one step prior. Sure. Because I've been in the situation where you have all these leads and you're then scrambling to say, oh my gosh, we can't keep up fast enough, or oh, we don't have the tools to support them. So before I actually start a new program, whether that's AdWords or paid social or something like LeadSift, I always map out the program and how that is going to look in the terms of communicating between marketing and sales, what kind of nurturing do they need, and most importantly, kind of what's the end goal here, right? And so when is marketing successful, and most importantly, when is sales and the company successful? And I actually get in front of the whiteboard, or I get out of the pencil and paper and old school, and I jot out what does this look like from start to finish. And so then, you know, one of the very, very first things that I try to do if I can is segment out an audience, right? And because I feel like the more segmentation that we get with our nurturing, whether that be marketing or sales, the more personal connection we have in the communication and the more authentic it is. And I think we can all speak on that experience when you get something in your inbox that says, hey, sorry for bulking up your inbox with yet another sales email, but I really want to tell you about tool A, B, and C. Or opposed if you get a more personal message like, hey, Alex, I saw the webinar that you just did, and I love your comment when you said this, right? Because blah, right? So being able to make that personal connection. So I always start first with the segment. And then I kind of work in what assets do we need to support this nurture funnel, because it can't all be blasting out into the inbox. It really has to be personal. People shouldn't shy away from phone calls. People shouldn't shy away from connecting on social media. People shouldn't shy away from commenting on blogs or attending somebody's webinar to try to make that personal touch.
And you touched on it a little bit in terms of making sure that you're in alignment with sales and having proper expectations set. So understanding running the base or the foundation of what you're going to run before you start with anything. But how much of that communication with sales is marketing just saying, hey, this is what's going to happen and we need you to carry this, versus sales kind of working together? In your experience, where have you seen the most success?
The most success is when the whole entire company is fully on board with something. And so what I really encourage my clients to do, or what I've done in the past that's most successful, is run a very, very small pilot program first. And I do this for any new paid channel that I run. And I actually scope out a whole process, right? And that's what's the purpose, right? Why the hell are we doing this? I state a hypothesis, and then I just map out, goals and objectives and tracking. And that is actually what I communicate to sales. And I think the most important thing here for marketers is to be able to speak the sales lingo. So, hey guys, we're bringing in a whole bunch of cool leads and I need you to nurture them. And yeah, it's going to be good. Well, that's setting yourself up for failure. If you go in and articulate to sales what this means to their pipeline, what this means to their velocity of time to close, what does this mean for their end goal of revenue? If you can set them up for success that way, your programs that you run will be that more successful. And if you can't articulate those goals in numbers and KPIs, you probably shouldn't be running the program, even though you really want to do the next cool thing, right? Even though you really want to bring in those leads, if you can't speak the sales lingo, rethink the process.
Right. And in terms of when you start to think about nurturing and bringing them through and to the point where sales is eventually taking over, and I know some of the programs you were running was through an outreach sequence, which had different levels of automated touch points versus personalized touch points and working those in. And you talk about collateral and having it to support it. When you have sales who typically goes with whatever's top of mind per se, right? They're not necessarily keeping up to date with all of the content that marketing is creating. How do you make sure that that communication in terms of where specific pieces of content that you built fit into the funnel are being executed properly within the dedicated stages?
So when I map this out, I actually map out the whole process in knowing what tools the sales folks are using. And if I'm going to use outreach.io for the example, but if it's outreach, I'll actually go in and help set this up, right? And put in the assets and put in the collateral that sales should be using. And I don't really leave it up to the salespeople because they're busy people, right? I mean, they're closing deals, right? And they have to speak to, essentially SDRs, right? Who have 90, touch points or 120 touch points a day. Because really marketing's job is to assist sales and make sales as successful as possible. So I actually go in there and I will create their nurture stream once I have it down on paper. And I've talked to a couple SDRs or a couple AEs, right? Whoever is going to be supporting this new program to get their feedback. Then we can go and we can work on this together once it's launched. So I don't leave anything into sales hands that they'll use. Hey, I created a folder for you in Google Drive and just pull from there. Well, no, right? They lost the link. They don't have time. I really try to get as much set up to support the team as possible.
Got it. And then as you start to build out that process, how are you determining, for example, first touch may be a digital ad, or first touch may be an email outreach or a social touch? When you're starting out, when you don't have any data to support what direction you should go, how have you been successful in determining how you want to set that those initial steps up?
Yeah, I look at the past data to help me out on this, right? And I look at sales activities from that perfect paying customer from maybe an event or maybe an AdWords, right? Something that isn't coming in from a referral or an organic standpoint, right? And I kind of will look at, hey, what's sales using now? And this is why you should be talking to sales about the activities that they're doing, because nothing is going to throw off sales more than when you're like, hey, yeah, and I want you to walk over to this person's office. It's just 2 blocks down the road, right? And get them out of their comfort zone. I mean, they have to be comfortable with, their sales process as well. And then I kind of start from there. So I use past data to really help support what should go in the nurture stream. And because I'm in marketing, I always love to experiment. So I will say, hey, we have this new thing that we want to try out. And I think you're the perfect, SDR, or you're the perfect AE to help support that. And, maybe that is going over and dropping something off at somebody's office, right? Or maybe that is a social touch point on Twitter or Quora, wherever they're kind of hanging out and engaging. So it's just not all marketing coming up with these like crazy initiatives, which often we do. It's just using past data to support what's working.
Okay. And I guess just to make sure we don't skip a step, in order to have that kind of past data, there has to be decent visibility into how the pipeline is moving at the moment, right? And understanding.
Yeah, I guess I kind of assuming, right, which I should never do it, someone is using something like a CRM of some point, or some type of platform where there's communication and there's tracking and reporting on it. But even so, even if you're bare bones and you're just starting out and you don't have that, and maybe someone's just working off of spreadsheets and Gmail, you can still work with your sales team to say, hey, how did you close this deal? Tell me how this went down. Which really, marketing should be asking those questions to sales all the time. How did this deal go down? How did you close it? How did they come in? What were their strong points? What were the challenges, the roadblocks that it took you X many days to close opposed to this deal?
And so, and I guess that comes down to, once you start to build out a new nurture campaign, is, as you talked about, segmenting or creating cohorts to analyze how they are currently moving. And that can be a place where you can optimize and test different pieces of content, different intros, different channels of first touch, second touch.
Yeah, and even like time between activities, time between calls, time between, emails. And I do want to emphasize that I don't think any 2 nurture streams should be the same.
Right.
Because if it was that easy and we could create cookie cutter nurture streams, I don't know, we wouldn't be sitting here, They all need to be different based on your goal and based on the segmentation and your persona, and maybe you're selling different products, right? Or different services. So that's all going to be different.
And so I guess this obviously starts to expand in terms of the level of complexity that you need in terms to run effective nurtures across different segmentations. And when you're coming in and starting to build a nurture program, do you typically start with one